We're in the Informer studio with lawyer John Herron, who lost his daughter in a violent attack at Royal Park a number of years ago. In fact, about 15 months ago.
Correct.
And we were talking about the extraordinary goings-on in court. And let's just go back earlier. There's a very clear line if you're trying to be take a timeline. He had been released from custodial care after a violent incident against a girlfriend. Is that correct?
Yes, I've read the transcripts, so I know what happened in that particular case.
So take us through that.
So he'd already been on bail for assaulting police, and he had a concealed weapon in Burke Street Mall.
Yep.
Then he had he went to his ex-girlfriend's place and attacked her, just some of the injuries when he attacked her. So he produced a knife. He then proceeded to strangle her. Strangulation, as far as criminals goes, is a red flag for next time round you'll kill someone. And then smashed her in the face and broke her eye socket. She only escaped by gouging his eyes. So other than that, I would say, reading that she escaped with a very narrow margin of being killed. But
she's been disfigured for life.
Correct.
Wow. And yet, he somehow got out of jail, or out of the medical care, out of he's a schizophrenic.
No,
is that the accusation?
That's an interesting point, because he didn't have medical care. He had a psychiatric assessment just before he was released,
right.
And he did what he called a code of silence. So when he went to the appeal, they had no psychological or psychiatric information to go on. Now, if I had to run an appeal in the county court, I would have had to produce a psychiatric report. It's an extraordinary situation to release with no evidence. But the second part of that, the really important part, is that he was released to no fixed address, and that's because he was released on what you call a community corrections order, or what your viewers might understand as parole or bail.
Which means that for an officer to follow up would be almost impossible.
Indeed, it's not enforceable.
You need to have an address.
Yes, completely not enforceable.
So the responsibility is on the so-called offender to go to find the parole officer and seek him out. Is that right?
Roughly,
to fulfill his commitments.
But he just went to live in Flinders Lane under cardboard boxes. That was it, until he bumped into Courtney. So, and then the other thing too, with drug taking. So he had ice problems for several years, and the judge.
So we have a schizophrenic with a drug problem, who is, for want of a better term, possibly gamed the system and found himself out again on the streets, and he's ended up meeting your daughter.
That's right.
And from that episode, we have where we are today.
That's right, that's right. So it was a chance encounter. He asked for a cigarette, and several hours later, she was dead.
Now, this happened on a wet evening in Melbourne.
That's right.
Apparently there was someone else in the park asleep.
Yeah, I think it was itinerant just sleeping there, so he heard these motions.
So he heard the noise.
Yeah, but don't forget that at that point of time, we're only going off what the killer said.
Okay.
Courtney's not here to say these things. All we know from, and I heard this on Monday and it made me physically ill, is that her last words apparently were, "Are you going to kill me?" Now, can you imagine as a parent, from the baby that you rear, that's her last words on earth? And then someone pointed this out to me. The rush through for the last hearing on Monday was 45 minutes. The killer, Hammond, beat my daughter for 50 minutes, longer than the actual final trial for her. That's the value of her life.
So, John Herron, what do we do now? Where are you? What's the next step? What can you do?
First of all,
for a professional, who's seeking justice. Yeah,
seeking justice.
You're in the business of, finding justice for people. How do you find justice for yourself after what you've had to endure the last 15 months?
There's a double jeopardy, so he can't be tried again. So that's all over. Okay. And that's something what the Office of Public Prosecutions rush through. So it goes away. So I'm fighting now two things. First of all, with the killer,
yep.
And I'll paint a scenario. Because he's not going to jail, he's gone.
So where is he going?
So he's going to the psychiatric hospital at Thomas Embley.
Now, for what term?
There's no term. So I'll paint a picture that could happen. So in theory, if he made and this is all hypothetical but plausible, he can make a recovery in 1 year, convince a psychiatrist and make an application to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court could then put a suppression order that is released, and then hypothetically if he went out and killed someone, you would only know that it popped up in the papers that this person...
Just as the killers of young Bolger in Britain, there was a suppression order, they were both deported and ended up in Perth, and no one knew about it until one of them was
But I
caught.
understand talking to journalists, I like looking at the whole process as well, because it's very unusual from my experience in the judicial system that this would happen. I haven't really come across it, but now I realise it's happening more frequently, and I understand there are 2 cases going through the Supreme Court now with suppression orders,
yep.
trying the mental impairment card, and 2 dead women.
So what's the rush? Why are we suddenly taking a new tack? Is there why this rush to provide a sentence or an outcome and move them on? Why can't they go through the proper procedures, the proper protocols, and have an outcome that is balanced, that's fair, and is representative of what went on?
So it's not a new event. This must be going on for some time. So I think...
So is the system broken?
System's always been broken, but it's the people that prosecute the crimes in the state. And the Office of Public Prosecution, the defence has a client, and that's the accused. The Office of Public Prosecution has 2 representations that they have to make: the victims,
yes,
and the community. Now you ask yourself...
Yeah, it's the balancing act.
Or both.
Uh-huh.
Has any of those parties been represented effectively here?
No.
There you go.
Not from the sound of it.
No. So...
So what do we do? I mean, what can you do? Are you going to take on the system itself and see if you can change it? Is that the ultimate goal of your plea at the moment? What do you want to derive from not only this interview, but the opportunity you had with a current affair? You actually got out and told the story. What did you want to achieve from that?
Interestingly, a current affair was attacked from the Office of Public Prosecutions for telling the truth, but we'll park that for a second. A coronial inquest is necessary, if not vital, to find out all of the factors about the early release of the killer, how the Office of Public Prosecutions, and I do know how that eventuated, and the main thing is that the community, that young women in Melbourne are not killed with such frequency, because the murder rate is not, shall we say, in comparison to other states, it's a bit lower in Victoria, but it has an extraordinary number of young women killed.
Well, I remember very clearly losing Jill Maher. I was still in the news team at Channel 10, and I can remember the horror going through that, because she worked at the ABC and she was someone we knew, we had dealings with, which makes it a very much tougher story to do. And that's why talking to you today about your daughter, losing your precious daughter, would be painful to the extreme. I commend you for trying to chart a course of trying to find justice, a proper level of justice, because from what you're telling us, there are so many elements here that have been left up in the air, and others that have been misread. We talk about taking missteps, but there seem to be not 1 or 2, but a number of them, whether it was at police level, whether it was by the Director of Public Prosecutions, and by the final outcome with the judge reading out the sentence and saying not guilty. When you heard those words, what did you feel when you heard the words not guilty?
Well, believe it or not, I knew this was coming for a year, so that was absolutely no surprise. As I said before, the hearing was rushed through in 45 minutes, so I knew that Office of Public Prosecutions had geared the parents up and informed me 2 or 3 months ago that that was their decision. So I knew, of course, if you go to the judge, both defence and prosecution agree, his hands are literally tied. So you normally would think it's the judge made this decision, but he had no choice.
Did you have any say at all?
I've tried several times to argue rationally with the Office of Public Prosecution and the Director, who completely dismissed me.
Stonewalled you?
Rudely, yes. And I wrote to the Attorney General to investigate their decision, and I never got a response.
What he said, what was his accusation, or what was the inference, that you were too invested in the story, that you couldn't detach yourself to hear what or see what he was seeing?
Not at all. In fact,
what was the inference from him?
Because the entire move to agree to not guilty was centred around the submission of 2 psychiatric reports. They read it to me, and there were holes in it left, right, and centre. So I just, what's this about? So, and with the psychiatric reports, the prosecution obtained it from the same institution as the defence did. Now, you understand the tendencies of conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest.
Correct.
The latter definitely applies there.
Why would they do that?
What would you think? So
I can't fathom a response to that.
So two overseas visiting unknown psychiatrists from the same institution, I would perceive the second one that the prosecution used, read the first one, and works in the same institution. What would be the chances that they would disagree? So, and the entire case is based on that. All of the other evidence, his intent, hiding the body, making concerted efforts to conceal Courtney's body, as we talked about, taking possessions, etc., totally ignored. So there was a rush on because, in this instance, the killer had used that defence straight away. And previously with his other offence, this killer is not from the wrong side of the tracks. And that's an important point. All those other killers, Gilmar, Gargasulas, etc., Sowa, they were. So they were easy to roll over.